Happy Tuesday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Hope you had a great Labor Day weekend. We are loaded today. Georgia just got a commitment, literally moments ago. We'll talk about that. On the show today, Jon Stinchcomb, reaction to the Georgia scrimmage from Saturday, what has been said about that. A very interesting look at one way in which I don't think Georgia's going to be caught off guard by the start of the season the way that some programs apparently have thus far this year. So a lot of ground to cover. Kirby gave us a big update on the position group. There is problems coming out of Gainesville that I don't think Kirby Smart's going to like. There is a very interesting scenario unfolding in Baton Rouge right now that impacts Georgia recruiting. We are just full to the rim today. So glad to have you with us. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Georgia just got a commitment moments ago. For those of you watching live on video, we will get to that in a moment. Tell you all about the young man who will now be a part of Georgia's 2021 class. Before we get to that, I watched college football last night. Many of you probably did as well, with BYU and Navy. And this was one of those games which, if you followed on Twitter, the gambling public was very involved with. People typically have a lot of respect for Navy, and why would you not? They typically play a certain brand of football very efficiently. Last night was not their night. And there's this thing now where you have like live in-game wagering. Used to be you could only make your bet before the game. Now many outlets provide you an opportunity to make a bet inside the game while it's going on, and people were racing to their in-game wagering option once they realized that Navy just did not have it last night. And as much as the gambling public was talking about this, I really believe that college football coaches who were watching this Navy-BYU game last night were probably also busy talking to themselves. And the overall bottom line is, and I'll back this point up in a moment, if you're a Georgia fan, there's a certain way in which your program, I believe, is preparing for the upcoming season that is a really good thing, and you, I don't think, have to worry about something that a lot of other folks in college football might need to be very concerned with, because you better believe after a lot of coaches watched Navy last night, they're on the phone talking to each other, or maybe they're gathered around like the head coach's office, in front of the TV there, and they were watching that game and saying, wow, when we play our first, whether it's an ACC team this Saturday, an SEC team a couple of weeks from now, or whenever else, are we going to be this ill-prepared? Are we going to be as caught off guard as the midshipmen were last night? After the game was over, Navy coach Ken Niumatalolo totally fell on the sword, totally admitted that a strategic error had led to Navy getting completely blown out by BYU. We're going to make this about Georgia, but first, let me let you hear the Navy coach.
That game was 1,000% my fault. Obviously, we weren't prepared. Well, we looked like that was our first live game, and unfortunately, normally your live stuff is against yourselves. I erred on the side of trying to keep our guys safe with COVID-19 and contact tracing stuff. But we weren't ready to play. Obviously, it's the worst Navy football game we've ever played, but we weren't prepared. And that was my fault because I chose to block bags and tackle donuts. It's all my fault. And it's like I told our guys, they didn't lose the game. I didn't have us prepared, and I made a decision on the safety side of it, and it showed we weren't ready to play.
You talk about overthinking the room here. This is the point we're getting to. Obviously, you've got to keep players safe during the coronavirus, but why would you think that somehow not tackling during practice is going to somehow prevent players from getting the coronavirus when they otherwise would? This seems to be a huge strategic error. And for someone like Niumatalolo, whose heart, I guess, was in the right place, and certainly he was well-intended, trying to keep his players healthy and safe before the start of the season, has seemed to err far too heavily on the other side of just avoiding the kind of physicality that's necessary to go out and play. This was actually talked about during halftime of the game. He was interviewed by Allison Williams, the ESPN sideline reporter. He admitted, like, during the game they had not been physical enough in practice leading into it, and it was obvious. I mean, as obvious as any college football game I've ever seen, they were going to get blown out just because they weren't ready to play. Only tackling, he's called them donuts and dummies and things like that. Well, here's where Georgia comes into play in all of this, and I could not help but think about this as I was watching Navy just completely get blown out last night. Let me tell you something. I am so glad that the real Navy is better than that Navy. Otherwise, America would be a very different country right now. But nonetheless, watching Navy unfold and doing all this last night, it came to mind something that Kirby Smart said like right before the start of all these summer practices. So if you're a Georgia fan, here's something you can take comfort in. There's a lot about Georgia right now we don't yet know. But the one thing we do know is being caught off guard by a lack of physicality in practice by the time Georgia plays its first game against Arkansas coming up in a couple of weeks. I don't think you have to worry about that being an issue for UGA on the basis of something Kirby Smart said a couple of weeks ago, which is incredibly relevant based on what happened to Navy last night. Here is Kirby.
To play football, you got to practice football. Are you content, or you feel that within the protocols that you have to work in, that you can be as aggressive as you need to be to get these guys ready to play football?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there's nothing that's talking about the aggressiveness of our practices. There's nothing. They've not dialed back, the type of practices or the number of practices, and COVID's not based on the aggressiveness of your practices. It's making sure that you have a safe number of student athletes out there, that you're controlling the transmissions of COVID from each player, and you're trying to make sure that doesn't happen. We're trying to keep that outside, and we're doing a lot of testing in order to keep that away. And that's the most important thing. It's not how the practices go or the work the kids go. If anything, they're going to have more time off between days now. There's going to be ample time to get the work done we need to get done to get ready.
So what Kirby's saying there ought to be common sense, but in sort of a weird way, the lead up at the start of the college football season, common sense hasn't been all that common. It hasn't been all that easy to come by. What Kirby's saying is if a guy that doesn't have coronavirus goes up in practice against another guy that doesn't have coronavirus, if they collide together in a tackling situation, popping the pads alone should not be enough to cause the coronavirus to spontaneously generate. If two guys who are coronavirus negative are tackling each other during practice or blocking each other or whatever else physicality requires in football practice, then they should remain coronavirus negative. It was the same thing when Austin Peay played Central Arkansas last week, because Central Arkansas turned around and played Alabama Birmingham this past Thursday night, and there was this thought of, oh my gosh, isn't it a miracle that Central Arkansas played Austin Peay and got ready to play UAB without any kind of positive test? But once again, if a team with no positive tests plays a team with no positive tests, the end result of that should be they should also remain coronavirus negative. That's just kind of the way it ought to work out. And I would say that some of these coaches may have all overthought the situation to think that because of the coronavirus alone, somehow you can't be physical during practice. It's an error that Ken Niumatalolo, the Navy coach, has admitted to making. And the good news here, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a problem for Georgia. Now, with that said, let me shift gears to something else that remains to be seen, whether it'll be a problem or not. Jamie Newman is gone. Georgia's quarterback competition is ongoing. It seems like some of the same stuff we were once saying about JT Daniels and Jamie Newman being neck and neck for the quarterback position with no one really separating themselves. We've essentially just changed the names, and Kirby Smart is still just kind of saying the same stuff that he always says about that quarterback competition. It was DeJuan Mathis getting some number one reps, along with JT Daniels this past Saturday in the second of UGA spring scrimmages. As far as an update on all of that with the quarterback situation, here is what Kirby Smart said when he spoke to reporters on Saturday afternoon.
It's a work in progress. We had guys today that went out and practiced well. We really want a guy to assume the lead and take the lead, and that hasn't happened yet. You'll have a guy have a great play or a great series and then come back. Nobody has really just taken charge and taken over. I wish I could say that.
So Kirby Smart says no one's taken over. We were going to do some more on the quarterback stuff today, but Georgia just getting a commitment is going to require us to kind of focus some attention on that a little bit, kind of examining DeJuan Mathis' role in all of this, examining JT Daniels' role in this. I would say that right now those are the two guys competing to be the starting quarterback. I mean, here's the one thing I think none of us can really know for sure. As I said before, it's easy to imagine Kirby Smart saying things like you just heard him say there, no matter what the quarterback situation was. If Jamie Newman was still involved, Smart would be saying kind of the same kind of stuff. He just kind of keeps his cards close to the vest on all of that. But what if it really is true? What if a quarterback really hasn't emerged yet? This offense is still a group that is, I would say, smart, phrase repeated, very much a work in progress. This was not a group last season that got it done to the tune of, any kind of statistical measure or just to the tune of helping Georgia be one of the teams that really had a great chance of winning the national championship. The offense held them back in doing that a year ago. The hope is that this year can be an upgrade, but a quarterback stepping up at some point in time is going to be really a requirement for making sure that happens. So whether it really is Dwan Mathis as a fan favorite getting a chance to be considered in this role, or what many expect now that Jamie Newman is gone for this job to truly belong to JT Daniels. One way or another, for Georgia to be as good as it can be this season, obviously one of these guys has to step up. There is still time. We've got a few weeks left before Georgia's first game. The number of practices, the number of scrimmage opportunities, that is quickly becoming more limited. So we will listen for Smart over the course of the next couple of weeks to see how much his language changes as Georgia tries to find the quarterback that can be the one to orchestrate what we hope is a major offensive upgrade. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and we're glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we are available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Really appreciate all of you being with us. Huge thanks to our friends at ESOG for making it all possible, a solutions-based company that's ready to help you with any of your foundation waterproofing problems. These kinds of things can be the thing that maybe you want to put off and pretend's not really going on, but don't do that. You know better than that. If you see those wet spots show up in your basement, crawl space, if you can tell that some water's creeping into your garage. In Georgia, water coming into basements is always a big issue. That's the kind of thing you want to handle now so it doesn't become a bigger problem later on. Same thing for foundation stuff there as well. Sometimes it's not a big deal. Sometimes, things can be, pretty easily fixed. Peace of mind can be given to you pretty quickly. In other cases, though, it's another reason to trust Engineered Solutions of Georgia because they have smart people doing the work for you. 2 full-time engineers on staff. It makes ESOG great to do business with. They're also proud partners of UGA, which makes them really fun to do business with. Good to support a company that's supporting UGA. That's what Engineered Solutions of Georgia does, and they are very easy to get in touch with. You can simply give them a call by dialing this number, 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. All right, it's Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment as a part of a Marlow's Tavern Insider Update. Let's see if we can squeeze in a couple of things, though, before we get there. At least one big thing here for a moment. Let's go around the doghouse here today, assisted by AAA. Just before we come on the air, Georgia gets some good recruiting news for the class of 2021. Jackson Meeks, a wide receiver from Phoenix City, Alabama, has made his plan. There's been some thought out there in the recruiting community for a while that Meeks might be trending towards UGA. He makes that official here. Meeks is a guy who's made a name for himself recently. The state of Alabama started high school football well before a lot of the rest of the country did. So there was a lot of eyes on the Alabama high school product, at a time in which there wasn't much football going on. And it just so happens that coincided with some really big games from Jackson Meeks. Very beginning of the season against Hoover, power program there in the state of Alabama. Meeks really showed out in a big way. So a lot of Georgia fans who had kind of gotten to know him a little bit because it was thought that maybe the relationship with Georgia was pretty strong, I think came to like Meeks a lot more, just on the basis of he had played really well against a big-time program at a time in which a lot of people were paying close attention to Alabama high school football. Phoenix City is also a little bit of a factory for receivers as of late. Justin Ross, you'll think about that name. I've heard some people call Phoenix City Wide Receiver University. I don't mean to be a stickler for the rules, but technically it is a high school, not a university. But nonetheless, it is famous for producing receivers as of late, so Meeks will try to hopefully be the next in that list. He's on his way to Georgia as a part of the class of 2021. Do me a favor, read more from Jeff Sintel at DawgNation.com, and he'll give you more details on that. Let me also mention this, that the first coaching opening has taken place of the upcoming season. Southern Miss's coach is now, Jay Hobson, was that the guy's name? He's no longer there anymore, and there's attention turning to who his eventual replacement will be. Any kind of replacement for Hobson is going to happen after the season. They'll have an interim situation there in Hattiesburg for right now, but Brett McMurphy, longtime college football reporter now with Stadium, among the names that he mentions, and I'll show this to you on the screen, among the names that he mentions is Georgia offensive coordinator Todd Monken, along with Hugh Freeze, and Larry Fedora, who's now the Baylor offensive coordinator. So, and by the way, you'll remember that that Monken is a former head coach at Southern Mississippi, so his name comes up there as a possible replacement for Hobson, who's on his way out with the Golden Eagles. This is a reminder of something that MJ Morris told us on DawgNation Daily a couple of days ago. Actually, he told this to Jeff Sintel, and we read the quote from the DawgNation forum here on the program, that in Morris's recruitment, Morris is now a 4-star quarterback at Pace Academy. What he had said was that the one thing that really stuck out as far as a message from Kirby Smart is that Kirby Smart said you really got to pay attention, get your best relationship with the head coach, because it's the head coach that's going to be there. All the other coaches, he said, might go away, but the head coach is the guy that you should expect to be there as a part of the full-time you're going to be there as a coordinator. The coordinator may want to go be a coordinator somewhere else, presumably like the NFL, or maybe be a head coach once again. So at least in terms of what MJ Morris has said, the way in which he's been recruited to Georgia was to not think about how long the coordinator was going to be there, but try to establish a relationship with the head coach. Is that a harbinger that maybe Georgia views Monken as a short-term proposition? We don't know that for sure, but what Morris said and what Jeff had quoted him as saying in the DawgNation forum certainly seems more relevant now that Brett McMurphy and others are reporting that Monken could be a candidate to eventually replace Hobson there at Southern Mississippi. Either way, it is our Around the Doghouse, assisted today by our friends at AAA. And, of course, my family, we've been AAA members since 2004. It's amazing to think about. We've always loved the great value that comes from the roadside assistance that you get there. But it's not the only great value you get from our friends at AAA. You can also get the AAA Savings Hackback. It's a combination of AAA benefits worth more than $1,000. The Hackback includes free career assistance, free identity theft protection, up to 85% off prescriptions, and discounts on food and essentials. It's part of every annual AAA membership, and just like the legendary roadside assistance, it can help pay for itself very quickly. So to find out more about it and to become a member today, go to AAA.com/GoSavings. That's AAA.com/GoSavings. All right, it is busy for us, as you can tell. A lot of ground being covered here. We're happy to have you as a part of all of it. Now, let's get ready to talk to a guy that we love catching up each and every week. It's our buddy Jon Stinchcomb, the former UGA All-American, as a part of a Marlow's Tavern Insider Update.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll settle to Jon Stinchcomb here as a part of a Marlow's Tavern Insider Update. Jon's normally a Monday guest for us. We got the chance to take a day off yesterday, kind of a rare Labor Day off for us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. That's not typically something that we would do because it's normally the day after the first game, or it would have been this year, Georgia's very first game against Virginia, but we took advantage of that opportunity. So, Jon, hope you got a nice Labor Day weekend. Thanks for spending some time with us here today, and we hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great, and I appreciate the opportunity to push back a day, considering we were floating down the Chattahoochee yesterday. So,
not bad.
I'm hoping you enjoyed your Labor Day as well.
I got to imagine a big old former offensive tackle on one of those inner tubes floating down the river. I got to imagine that's probably quite a sight to see, I have to imagine.
We went out there. My family enjoyed it. Just, we want to get outside. What a beautiful day.
No, it was very nice.
I'm glad there was nobody taking pictures. I'll say that.
Listen, I know exactly how you feel when it comes to that, although I should point out that as a ex-player, you were in tremendous physical condition, so there'd be no problem if any kind of photographs did emerge of that. Let me backtrack for a minute on big news the last few days that we haven't had a chance to speak to you about. Jamie Newman has decided to opt out for the upcoming year. This is a little bit of quarterback drama for Georgia, a position where I think they've had a little too much drama in recent seasons when you kind of factor everything that's gone on there. We don't really know how good Newman would have been for Georgia. We don't know how good Georgia's going to be without him. What do you make of all of this? And I guess you can kind of take it anywhere you want to go.
Well, yeah, I'm disappointed. I was excited to see what he could do. I think it would be one of the first dual-threat quarterbacks in that starting role that Georgia's had in quite some time, especially at his caliber. And so I'm disappointed as a fan. I just continue to be baffled at all these decisions that are made, and you have to do what's best for you. But I think there's so many out there that are questioning why now. What changed for him that if it was because of COVID and that's what's being expressed, and we're to take that at its face value, then I struggle to understand what changed in that dynamic for him, and it's not for me to understand. But man, is it it's hard to hear, and you wish him well. But I certainly was excited about the proposition of him being under center and what that would bring to the table. And like sports so often does, you just have to turn the page and move on and get ready for what's next and who's next. And there's not a lot of time left to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Obviously, as you said before, if it's truly a coronavirus related thing, and Georgia has had this, the university has had some additional positive cases as of late. So if that's truly what this is about, then I think all of us, and Smart himself has said this, you just kind of wish him well, and you understand that decision to opt out at a time like this. There's also been some speculation that more is going on here than just being concerned about the coronavirus after having been at Georgia for as long as Newman has now been here. And I guess I'm kind of left to wonder this, and John, I think you'll agree with me on this. Jamie Newman could be the next Patrick Mahomes, and Kirby Smart would still be treating this quarterback situation exactly the way that he is, talking about there being no separation, challenging everybody to get better, using the old notion of ironing, sharpening iron to hopefully produce the best quarterback possible. Rightly or wrongly, that's just the way that Smart goes about his process. So you almost wonder, since I think very few of us are surprised by the way that Smart has been talking about this, if Newman himself had done enough homework on exactly how to be treated at Georgia, because I think for most of us, this is not a surprise. If anything, it's surprising to me that this was surprising to Newman.
Well, and if that's the case, then, ill prepared for the situation that you walked into would have to be the best descriptor, because Kirby has done that from day one, and I think it's made the program better because of it, in that competition has been at a premium, and you've seen good players become great players, and the progression of athletes once they put their first foot on campus in Athens has been one of the staples, a welcome change of something that I think has been missing, and we've discussed on this show before, in that you've seen the development of players. They arrive as high-quality football players, and they get better, which is a sign of really good programs. And that comes with challenging and difficult situations, and you're probably not going to get the coddling that might be available to you in other places. And for me, it's speculation as to what all went into play with the Jamie decision. But man, is there a lot of speculation out there? And there's plenty of swirling conjecture as to what other influencing factors might have led to this kind of decision, because I recognize there's more cases popping up in Athens, but that's not unexpected. I think that could have been predicted long before the actual numbers came back in. So, again, I think the focus shifts to who is ready is JT Daniels. He's not. If that was the competition we're talking about, he wasn't cleared for 100% play yet. So it's hard for me to imagine that would be the threat that seems to be most discussed when saying, if it's not COVID, then what is it? But man, there's plenty to question at this point.
Let me do one more on this topic, then I want to shift gears to something else. Am I unfair for saying, as I mentioned before, to me there's been just a little too much drama for Georgia at quarterback lately, for a coach in Kirby Smart who's typically very good at managing all situations, incredible attention to detail. You've got the weirdness of Jamie Newman. Now, Smart can't control the outside hype, but he's been hyped up so much this offseason, and now he leaves without playing a game. Prior to that, you had Jake Fromm left after his junior season after really not having a very good year. I think there were pretty mixed, opinions about what his NFL future was going to be. He did make the Bills roster, but maybe only just barely this past weekend. It was weird that he left the way that he did. Obviously, you go back to the Justin Fields thing the year before that. For a program in Georgia that's so buttoned up in almost every regard, it just seems like there's, frankly, something kind of approaching chaos at the quarterback situation a bit as of late. Is that unfair for me to describe it that way in your mind?
Well, yeah, I think the drama comes because so much talent has come to Athens, and whether or not, the frustration comes with the lack of retention thereof. Justin Fields, we never really got to see what that looks like. It was very limited that first freshman year and the few months that he was able to be in Athens, and even less so with Jamie Newman. So I think the frustration comes with you've got so much talent that has been able to sign and you've brought them to Athens, but yet we're left wanting more. And I think that obviously holds true with Justin and Jamie, and I'd say that even is the case with Jake, in that, you think that Holly might have left a little something on the table and, just squeaked by in a the Buffalo Bills roster that is carrying 3 quarterbacks, and he was fortunate to have made that roster. Yeah. So I think that's where all the frustration comes in, and it's a problem. It's the fact that yes, you can get these talented quarterbacks here, but man, we got to be able to use them and keep them here long enough for them to form a foundation, at least in that position.
It is Jon Stinchcomb. It's a part of a Marlow's Tavern Insider Update. And speaking of our friends at Marlow's Tavern, Chef John Metz, who's the head chef there at Marlow's Tavern, knows that so many of you during this time that we've been going through with the coronavirus have really sharpened your skills at home with what you've been grilling and the recipes that you've been using. So in honor of that, Marlow's is kicking off the What You've Been Grilling contest. They want to hear from you about what you have been grilling, and they want to potentially provide you with some real nice rewards for the winner here. So send in your recipe for what you've been grilling, and the grand prize package here is going to be worth more than $1,400 and includes a large, big green egg. So here's what you do. To send your recipe in, to enter your recipe, go to marlowstavern.com. That's marlowstavern.com. And you can complete the entry form. The entries must be submitted by October 5th, and the winner is going to be announced on October 24th. So get that done here today. Marlow's Tavern, cheers to that. Good stuff there all the way around. John, let me bring you in on a topic I was also discussing before you came on with us today. Navy last night totally obliterated by BYU. After the game, Navy coach Ken Niumatalolo admitted they hadn't been physical during practice, hadn't been live tackling. They'd been using dummies, and he called them donuts and everything like that, as opposed to actually tackling each other. This is something that Kirby Smart a couple of weeks ago explicitly said Georgia would be doing, that the presence of the coronavirus shouldn't prevent a team from practicing in a physical manner, and I guess people wouldn't expect anything different than that from UGA and Smart. But as a former player, how important is that part of the preparation to get ready for an upcoming season? Because in addition to coronavirus, I mean, in the NFL, I think there are fewer physical practices than probably ever before because of the collective bargaining agreements and things like that. As someone who's kind of done it at the NFL and the college level, how ready for you can you be for a season without having a good bit of pad popping going on during practice?
I think it's vital, and I'm speaking from personal experience. The old adage of everybody's got a perfect plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, that holds true. I work with offensive linemen, as you know, that prepare for the draft, and you got guys that can take beautiful steps, and everything looks perfect until the bullets start flying. And when that happens, things go out the window, and you don't know what you need to fix and what you need to work on until you've been thrown in the fire a little bit, and you go, man, that the speed is more than I expected, or the physicality, or what I thought in my technique was pretty firm. I need to work on, and it's just because I haven't seen it at full speed. So I understand the shift in mentality of trying to use more dummies and the donuts, and but at the end of the day, football is a rough sport. You've got to be able to, at the very least, simulate the physicality that you're going to experience on game day And I think Navy is a prime example of a team that was woefully unprepared.
Yeah.
The NFL, I think it's going to be similar, where guys that are making this transition from college to the pros, they haven't had 4 preseason games to start seeing the differences in the level. Same for college. If you're expecting some of these freshmen to walk in and they've looked good in practice, well, speed, there is going to be an increase in intensity that they haven't seen yet, that if you've limited that contact and that exposure to the speed of the game, then what we're going to see is it's going to play out on Saturdays during a game, which in my mind is the worst time for you to experience those kind of transitions.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. How crazy is it for you, by the way, that in a normal situation, we'd be sitting here talking about Georgia's first game having taken place last night.
Oh.
It was really supposed to be Georgia-Virginia, not BYU Navy, that was on the national radar for the Labor Day night. How strange is it for you that that's not what took place?
Well, I'm a guy who's trying to be optimistic, and I am grateful that we've got a 10-game slate of all SEC games. That's exciting to me. I think that's a great season, but it's hard to not get past the disappointment of, man, we should already be playing ball, and just recognizing that we are in unique circumstances, and BYU and Navy is football, but it certainly isn't Georgia football, and I think it just whets my appetite to want even more once we get cranked up.
Well, I will say this. It's almost like, in a weird way, the opposite for me, in that it's been such a long time since I thought Georgia might play Virginia. In a weird way, I almost forgot the game was ever scheduled, because it just seems like that, for the longest time now, we've kind of assumed that the season was going to look a little bit different. I'm right there with you. I think the alternative has actually worked out pretty well. The 10-game SEC-only schedule starting in a couple of weeks, I'm actually really jazzed for that. I think the Georgia schedule is going to be a lot of fun. It's just kind of, when you realize this was the date it should have began, it's just kind of weird to think that there was a time in which we actually thought Georgia would be playing 12 games. This has just been a strange year, obviously, John.
It has, and man, I would have loved to have kicked off the season with a Georgia-Virginia game, but we're all making adjustments, and I think at the end of the day, you and I are alike in the fact that we're just grateful the opportunity is coming, that we will see some football.
No doubt.
It's not going to have Jamie Newman at quarterback, which is a little disappointing, but if 2020 has taught us anything, it's how to deal with some disappointment across the board and be grateful for what we get. So we'll take it.
That is exactly right. Speaking of things that we'll take, John, my understanding is you and I may get together and have a little lunch at Marlow's Tavern tomorrow. That should be a lot of fun.
Buddy, I'm fired up. I can't wait. Every time we talk, we're talking about Chef John's grilling, and Marlow does it best, in my opinion. So I can't wait to join you tomorrow afternoon for some Marlows.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. John, thanks for your time. Thanks for being here for our Marlow's Tavern Insider Update. Have a great day, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Always a pleasure. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so really good stuff all the way around there with John. I think he and I are going to get together for a little Marlow's lunch tomorrow. Every now and then we'd like to try to do that, and just so we can make sure we know what's on the menu. Sometimes they're also good enough to tip us off, and they've got some new things coming. So I think tomorrow we're going to be doing some sampling for some new stuff that's coming out. I always look forward to that. That's going to go down tomorrow. Let's get ready to transition now to our SEC. Before we do that, let me remind you that winning season is back with our friends at MyBookie. That means all the really cool stuff, survivor pools, super contests, everything else. And Squares games, it's all available for you there with our friends at MyBookie. Also, for those new members, big-time chance to get some added bonuses when you sign up for the first time when you use the promo code DawgNation. We told you about MyBookie for years. When you use the promo code DawgNation, they're going to double your first deposit. You can also get up to $1,000 in free play there as well. So it's just a way of getting things more exciting with what's going on there. So simply go to whichever search engine you like to use, put in MyBookie. The internet will do the work for you. But to get the big, sign-up bonus, the doubling of the first deposit, to kind of add to that account before you kind of get rolling there, you've got to use the promo code DawgNation. It's all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be. DAWG, DawgNation, and you can get very, very, very nice sign-up bonus, a chance to double your first deposit, and be in to win a winning season with our friends at MyBookie. Make sure you check that out today, but make sure you use the promo code DawgNation. Very important you do that to get the big bonuses there. Okay, there's a couple of stories I want to talk about as part of our SEC through right now. And you may have read this at DawgNation.com. So Dan Mullen, the Florida coach, talking to reporters, the issue comes up of something that Mullen has liked to do, which is have his players, go out for warm-ups without their jerseys on so that you can't tell who is who. You don't see the jersey numbers there. And he was frustrated they're not going to be able to do that. They've been told they can't do that. And the question comes up, well, who was it you think that turned you in? And Mullen said, who do you think? And the reporter came back and said, Georgia. And then Mullen says, you said that, not me. There's a way of obviously reading into that, especially when you hear the audio. I can't play the audio at the same time we're doing the music, so you can't hear that necessarily. But when you hear the audio, and there's a video link for this at DawgNation.com that you can see for yourself. But when you do see this, it's certainly an insinuation that maybe Mullen thinks that Georgia didn't want Florida, warming up before the game that its jersey numbers on. Here's what I can tell you. Now, I don't know this to be true, but I kind of know it to be true, if you get what I'm saying. If Kirby Smart hears about this, and eventually he will, he is not going to be happy about this. I mean, in one way, to the average fan, this whole thing may seem less severe than, remember the spring game attendance figure that was supposedly some sort of troll against Georgia and how long it'd been since they won a national championship? I think fans don't like that kind of stuff. I think for the most part, Kirby Smart probably didn't care all that much. I think stuff like this probably bothers Kirby more than the other, because here's the one thing you know about Kirby. Kirby does not like taking questions from reporters. He gets bristly, if that's a word. Is that a word? He gets bristly from time to time with reporters. This is the kind of thing that, and I guess maybe timeline-wise, maybe it wasn't appropriate to ask him about this on Saturday, but maybe before the Georgia game against Florida in November. This is the kind of thing that Smart might get asked about. Hey, did you complain about Florida warming up on the field without jersey numbers on? Kirby Smart just doesn't want to field that question. This kind of goes back to the thing that old coaches kind of say all the time. You coach your team, I'll coach mine, and let's not worry about each other too much. So I already suspect, I think most of you probably do as well, that Smart does not like Mullen. We've got some circumstantial evidence that seems to be a hint at that. I would say this is another chapter in that book of maybe some bad blood between these two guys. Listen, here's the thing, and I'm going to say this as kindly and generously as possible. If your solution for not having elite players is to not put jersey numbers in their back so we can't tell one mediocre player from the next, that strategy doesn't work as well as you think it does anyway. So, in this case, Mullen pats himself on the back for the ingenious strategy of, hiding players during warm-ups, things like that. I don't think that works as well as you think that it does, but nonetheless, pretty interesting all the way around. Something else that was interesting, and I wrote about this myself at DawgNation.com over the weekend. You may remember LSU coach Ed Orgeron was just aghast. I think apoplectic is a word that maybe fits here. Probably a bigger word than I should be using. A couple of weeks ago at the notion that some Georgia recruits, a couple of commits, uncommitted prospects, found a way to gather together in Athens for a nice weekend. They can't visit the campus, can't have face-to-face contact with coaches, but it doesn't need to prevent them from kind of satisfying their curiosity about what the experience at Georgia would be like. Some of the players they might play with. Ed Orgeron kind of gave the hint that maybe he would want to see what the NCAA has to say about that. That was his whole thing at the time. Well, lo and behold, this week LSU did a very similar thing. Now, admittedly, this is well orchestrated, well executed. Nation's number one prospect Corey Foreman on hand. Mason Smith, who obviously lives in Louisiana, was on hand. This was organized by Nussmeier, the quarterback commit there for LSU. Yeah, let's show the Corey Foreman a little bit of video, or I should say photographic evidence of this. One of the popular barbershops there in the Baton Rouge area had put a welcome to Corey Foreman sign. Foreman seemed to like that, saying it's the little things about all of that. So all of this thing seems really well executed by LSU. much the same way Georgia had a bunch of big names together. LSU was able to put some big names out there together too. So I just think it's really funny that you go from, if you're Orgeron, being very unhappy about this, and it wasn't just Georgia who did this. The weekend that Orgeron complained, Oklahoma did a similar thing, and based on some of the online chatter, it seems like Oklahoma's guys may have pushed the envelope a little more than what the Georgia folks did. The Georgia folks, best I could tell, it was some recruits and some commits getting together for some outdoor activities. There were some rumors that some of the Oklahoma guys may have actually made their way onto the field there in Norman. I don't think anything like that happened at UGA. We don't have any evidence of that one way or another, but just kind of pretty interesting all the way around that what Orgeron once criticized Georgia for, now some of the LSU guys are doing as well. Nussmeier, the quarterback commit, was telling 24/7 Sports that he'd been around the program for a while, or I should say the city of Baton Rouge. He'd been there many times. Some of these guys hadn't had a chance to do that. And so he kind of tried to get it together. I know Jeff Sentell's got some stuff coming on Mason Smith this week at DawgNation.com. Smith is one of those guys that I still think is going to be kind of a tough pull with all of this, just because it's hard to get a big defensive lineman like this out of the state of Louisiana. But I would say that even coming off this weekend, the relationship between George and Foreman, I think, stands to be pretty good. I know he put something on Instagram the other day of himself in a Georgia uniform, which, maybe that's a sign of good news. Maybe it's not. So I think this recruiting stuff is about to get very, very interesting. And it sounds like Jeff Sentell, with some of his coverage at DawgNations.com, has got an interesting spin coming on some of it there as well. So we'll keep following all of that. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. And actually, one more story I was going to mention. I forgot to do this. So this kind of matters, I guess, kind of does, and I just think it's kind of interesting that Mark Stoops, the Kentucky coach, spoke this week about the fact they are still waiting on news about Joey Gatewood, the former Auburn quarterback now transferred to Kentucky. He has heard nothing about his NCAA waiver request to be eligible this upcoming season. There are a couple of SEC guys that are kind of still out there in that same, vein. Otis Reese, the former Georgia safety, is kind of in that group too. So you've got, JT Daniels that transferred, heard very quickly at Georgia. Cade Mays waited for a while, got denied at Tennessee. And then some guys, and this is probably across the sports year after year, the most common complaint of the NCAA, that other people just sort of wait interminably and never really hear anything. And Gatewood at Kentucky is an example of that. I'm starting to suspect a little bit that some of this may be related to how much the players old school is willing to cooperate and I guess give the blessing to the eligibility status being granted. I can sort of imagine, especially since Auburn's first game this year happens to be against Kentucky, they're not thrilled about the possibility that Gatewood might be eligible at Kentucky. So I could see them maybe trying to fight this behind the scenes, however much that's even possible. Obviously, Jeremy Pruitt had suggested that Georgia had kind of fought against Cade Mays being eligible behind the scenes. So I sort of suspect some of that might be going on. But nonetheless, the Gatewood story's still out there. I think that a lot of people don't think this, but I think if Gatewood's eligible, I believe he could beat out Wilson as the starting quarterback there in Lexington. But we may never find that out. Nonetheless, that's your SEC through. All right, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, I want to give you another piece of Kirby Smart audio before we're done, because one of the things I think is really important for Georgia this season, especially now that Dominic Blaylock is injured, not playing, you're going to have to find a way to use these tight ends in a creative way. And a tight end as a pass-catching target might be necessary, just given that the receiver position for Georgia is still a bit unsettled. I thought that Smart offered a very interesting update on that position group. And it's one of those things, see if you notice the way I do. The Eli Manning gif that everybody always uses where he's like excited and then he kind of gets deflated once he realizes that the call's not going his way? This is very similar to that, where when Smart starts talking tight ends here, a lot of excitement that kind of quickly gives way to a little bit of a downbeat. Nonetheless, here's Smart on tight ends.
I've been really pleased with Trey McKitty. He is tough. He's physical. He works. He blocks. He catches. Does a good job. He got a little bit of a ding today and ended up having to leave the scrimmage, I think, about halfway through. I think he'll be fine. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's his ankle or his knee, but we felt like he'd be good. Ron was checking on him. Darnell's been working his way into shape. He was at one time 273. We felt like he needed to get down to about 263 to be effective. He's a big man. And then we got Godey and Brett back, and those guys took some reps. They've done a good job as well, and then Fitz has been around. So we've got a good depth there at tight end. We're trying to figure out what each one's skill set is as we endeavor in this offense and try to figure out the best way to use those guys.
So how much do you love this? Smart praising Trey McKitty. saying he's doing great. It sounds good. Then he says, oh, yeah, but he's also banged up and injured. It's kind of like that roller coaster up, then quickly back down. Interesting on Darnell Washington. Not a surprise to hear that Washington probably needs to be a little thinner than kind of where we saw him at high school all-star season, for instance. He was just a little too big going back to that time. Also nice to hear that a guy like Rylan Goody, who I still think can be a player in this offense, maybe he's kind of overcome some of the injury stuff. It seemed like he'd even maybe had a little bit of a setback during the offseason at one point in time, so kind of nice to hear Goody mentioned in the mix there. Fitzpatrick as well. So as I said before, I think that tight end is potentially a pretty important position for Georgia just because wide receivers are unproven and Dominic Blaylock has now been subtracted from that group. So you'll continue to kind of follow that story a little bit. Also, make sure you check out Jeff's story, DawgNation.com. Brock Vandegrift, really good highlights from him this past weekend in his high school season opener. That was fun to see. Gator Hater Updater, 1,410 days. We'll see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. So I don't know if you could have done much more than that on one show, but nonetheless, we'll roll on here for R.S. Andrews Cool Down, and I'll say, and on video. Good to have all of you with us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We'll take your comments, getting ready, getting closer for Georgia's season, and some other footballs kind of around here as well. As I scratch my face in complete defiance of standard COVID protocol. But nonetheless, huge thanks to all of you for being here. We'll get your comments. By the way, don't forget to check out our friends at R.S. Andrews. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You know, the weather's been pleasant last couple of days, but hot weather is still yet to come in the summer season that we're in. So make sure your air conditioning unit's still ready to go. Get that system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. I've heard from people who said, listen, that's something I do every single year. Make sure my system is tuned up. I want it to remain at factory fresh specs for as long as it possibly can. I don't want it to go out on me without, being prepared and kind of knowing what's up there. And I think that's really smart. So do that yourself. You can find my friends at R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. All right, with all of that said, let me get ready to go to Facebook first. I'll get your comments there, YouTube as well. We'll probably do more on the quarterbacks. I intended to do more on that today. We'll probably end up doing a little bit more on that tomorrow. Just with Jackson Meeks committing, we had to kind of squeeze that into the show and then had a lot of other ground to try to get all the way around there. So, on Facebook, let's see what's going on here. Robert Barnes says, I love them Gators running their mouth. Please keep on talking. Yeah, Robert's right about this. If you want Georgia's focus for Florida to be exactly where it needs to be, and, deep down we know that Georgia's going to find that edge for that game anyway, but Florida finds a way to make it easy for Georgia every single year. I'm telling you right now, I don't know this as a fact, but I know it. If it's one of those things I have pretty good intuition on this kind of stuff sometimes. I can guarantee you Kirby Smart did not like that. If he finds out about it, eventually he will. He'll be asked about it. That kind of stuff frustrates him. This is the kind of like annoying gnat-like behavior that I can promise you Kirby Smart does not like. I knew this was coming eventually. So Kurt Howard on Facebook is saying that we need to edit out Jamie Newman out of this practice video. I knew that was coming at some point in time, that we were going to get criticized for that. This is a very strange year because of coronavirus and that we don't have a ton of video. And like the one video we do have is Jamie Newman's all over that. I would say that Newman, throwing the football is probably 20% of that video or something like that. So it's going to be a little bit of a tricky thing, but eventually we're going to probably have to edit that out. I had a feeling that was coming at some point in time. Daniel Aldrich says, do you think JT Daniels will be the starter? Yeah, I do. I do. Matt Rukavina asking the same question. Yeah, I mean, listen, as I said before, Kirby Smart's, he's going to speak about this a certain kind of way. That's just kind of his MO. But Daniels is the guy that's got the experience. With all due respect to Mathis, who I think is justifiably a fan favorite, and people hope to get a chance to see, some of. I mean, Daniels has been a starter for a full year at the FBS level and really been, around FBS programs now for a couple of years. I mean, I think that does give him an advantage, in a situation like this. I do. Not a insurmountable advantage, but a pretty sizable advantage. Jason Glossier says we should go take a new video at Georgia. If wishing made it so, Jason. I'm not sure when we'll get to take more video at Georgia again, unfortunately. Brian Williamson says don't count out DeJuan Mathis, and I think it's fair not to count him out for sure, or really probably anybody else, although I would put of the other quarterbacks Mathis ahead of that group right now. Mickey Fuquay says, I hope they use tight ends more this year, and I would say there's a chance they do. Chase Barbie says, I like these big-time media outlets sleeping on the Dogs now that Newman is gone. UGA is a sleeping giant. I think that's interesting. The other thing I'll say is, I think there's been an assumption about Georgia that's probably a little bit different than some people, maybe realize, that the commenter's probably right, that the people who hyped up Newman the most were national media types. I'm going to include, David Pollack in that national media type for a moment because he is a game day host, even though he's a former, Georgia Star UGA alum. That if you looked at our comment section on a day in, day out basis, you very rarely saw anyone who said, I'm telling you right now, Jamie Newman's going to be the number 1 overall pick and he's going to be the Heisman Trophy winner. Sometimes you would see people glad that other people thought that, excited about some of the chatter that existed about him kind of out there, but you did not necessarily see a lot of Georgia fans themselves putting themselves out there on it. The level of hype that existed for Newman was created far more outside the bubble of DawgNation than it was inside the bubble of DawgNation, in other words. And so I guess, if nothing else, it's nice that the group that hyped up Newman is at least now being consistent and saying, well, now that he's gone, we think a little less about Georgia. At least they're being consistent. I mean, look, I have expressed my frustration about the whole narrative around a lot of this, for a while now. I was excited about seeing Newman. I don't know, I don't know how good he was going to be. But the one thing I've got too much respect for all of you to do is, now that he's gone, pretend like that he was doomed to fail, was not going to be the starting quarterback, and the guys that are here were actually better than him all along anyway. Anytime someone is telling you 100% of what you want to hear, there's a 100% chance they are lying about something. They are either deceived or deceivers. Life is just never 100% the way you want it to be. Newman's departure, is it a disaster for Georgia? Maybe not. Is it a little bit of a problem? Probably so. Kirby Smart's saltiness about even being asked about it on Saturday is probably evidence of that. Let me do a couple more on Facebook, and we will get some YouTube comment. Clarence Lee says you can't win a championship without a great defense. That may be true, although I would say that recent years would suggest that being a high-powered offense is a prerequisite as well. Mark Wright says, sucks we have to wait until 9:26 to know who will start at quarterback. Yeah, I guess I'd be shocked if it's not Daniels, though, one way or another. Winston Relaford says, Mullen reminds me of Malzahn, both good coaches, supposedly, but big games, they get out-coached, to put it nicely. So here is where I'm going to, deep dive in a way that probably frustrates some of you. If you took Malzahn's performances against Georgia out of the equation for a moment, because for whatever reason, Georgia has just dominated Malzahn, I'm talking about for years. Even the best Auburn teams barely beat Georgia, and other than that, they're not beating Georgia at all. So Georgia has completely dominated Gus Malzahn. But other than that, Malzahn has done pretty well against almost everybody. Malzahn's beaten Saban, 3 times since 2013? He's had more success against Saban than Dabo Swinney had. I think it's kind of weird that we treat Mullen, by we, I mean, it's really not us, it's national media types. I think it's weird that Mullen gets treated as the coaching genius, but in comparison to Gus Malzahn, who has had some legitimate success, Malzahn won the SEC West 2 years ago at a time in which it was really pretty hard to do that, pretty deep division. If I'm Gus Malzahn, who I realize most of you don't like either, and justifiably so, Auburn's a big Georgia rival, but Malzahn has actually accomplished something in his life. They were both offensive coordinators for teams that won national championships. But as a head coach, I mean, listen, as much as it sucks to admit this, Malzahn won the SEC in 2013. Malzahn has, beaten Alabama a couple of times. Malzahn's been a factor. Dan Mullen, by comparison, has done none of that. And you can say, well, for a while, Mullen was at Mississippi State. Malzahn's been at Auburn the entire time. That's supposed to be a big-time program. That's fair, but now we're going on year 3 for Dan Mullen at Florida. It's one of the reasons why I am of such strong belief that the narrative of Mullen as this like brilliant coach, best game coach in the SEC, sometimes he's credited by some for being, that narrative can't survive this season if the results don't back that up. And being even as successful as Auburn has been, it's just a really hard thing to do when you're, playing those kinds of teams, that kind of schedule. So I've always really felt like it was weird that when you look at how the two coaches have recruited, how the two programs have performed, we treat Auburn as this gigantic underachiever and somehow Dan Mullen is this massive overachiever when the results, at least I would say, don't really point to that. But nonetheless, let me go to YouTube for a moment and then we'll pop back over to Facebook here in just a little bit, and hope all of you are doing great here on this Tuesday. It is a little weird to think that we're this deep into the month of September and we're still kind of a ways away from Georgia football taking place. I enjoyed BYU Navy last night. There were a lot of blowouts this weekend for the games that you did pay attention to. That is certainly fair. String Gene asking about the recent Georgia commit to this morning, Jackson Meeks, the 3-star from Phoenix City. He's a receiver. Phoenix City has been a place once known to be the place where the Central Time Zone begins. Now, I think, known as a place that produces a lot of really good wide receivers, Justin Ross included, and Meeks will try to be the next in that group. Meeks really showed out near the beginning of the year. Remember, Alabama high school football started way sooner than a lot of these other states, and Meeks had a couple of really good games near the very beginning, including against Hoover, the Buccaneers there, probably best program in the state of Alabama, one of the best programs in this region. And Meeks had a really good game against them. So he got a lot of attention because of that. Been on Georgia's radar for a while now. You can read more from Jeff Sintel at DawgNation.com on Meeks. And obviously, I think one of the things that kind of goes without saying here on this Meeks discussion is that Georgia recruited so well at receiver a year ago, brought so many guys in, that recruiting that position at a really high level the following year after that huge haul for the class of 2020 was not going to be an easy thing to do. James Wade says, in your opinion, which current Georgia quarterback gives them the best chance to win a championship this season? I love Dwan Mathis. I cheer for Dwan Mathis. I think that Dwan Mathis is one of the great stories in recent Georgia football history. But I don't think that Mathis gives Georgia nearly as great a chance as JT Daniels, probably would. If for some reason Daniels is not starting at quarterback for Georgia, I think something's really gone wrong. And that's not a criticism of Mathis because I love Mathis and I want to see Mathis play. I'm excited about Mathis. If Dwan Mathis were to take the reins at Georgia, it would become, I think, a big time fan favorite type story. There'd just be a lot of just a lot of good feels around all of that. But, this is a time in which a lot of teams in the SEC feel pretty good about what they have at quarterback. Georgia being able to lean on a USC transfer would give them a chance to kind of feel the same way. If you're talking about a guy that's never taken a college snap, you're just talking about a much more of an unknown commodity there, which make you pretty nervous. So, I love Mathis, but if you ask me who gives Georgia the best chance of winning a championship this year, I think it's clearly Daniel. Big Dog asked about the situation at South Carolina. I did not talk about that. I did see that just before I came on the air. I just wasn't ready to talk about that as of yet. I just haven't, the Orgeron thing, the Mullen thing is just more fun. The South Carolina thing, I think, is there's some allegations out there online of some South Carolina players being involved in an altercation with a former walk-on. It's certainly on the internet. I'm assuming we'll probably talk about it this week. That was pretty new for me and a lot less fun than Orgeron recruiting, Mullen doing his thing. So I kind of left that alone for right now. But I would imagine that comes up at some point in time this week. Frank Patterson says, if you had to pick one team in the SEC West to drop 3 games or more, who would it be, and why would you pick LSU? So Frank's obviously having some fun on that. I do think that LSU is a very interesting team right now. I guess Desmond Howard on ESPN on Saturday is still relatively high on LSU, even with all they've lost here. And they have lost a ton. They still have a lot of top-flight players remaining. Terrace Marshall's still there at the receiver position. They've still got some young running backs. Stingley's still there at the cornerback position. The big transfer linebacker is in the fold and available for them. So top end talent wise, they've still got a good bit of that, even with all they've lost. I think a lot of this comes down to Miles Brennan. LSU fans have seemingly talked themselves into Brennan. I'm not quite so sure how good he is, but they've seemingly talked themselves into him. LSU's a really fascinating team, and obviously, and so many of you pointed this out to me pretty quickly. Once Shelvin was gone and some of the recent departures they've had, a lot of you were saying to me, boy, that tough supposed game that Florida's supposed to have against LSU doesn't seem quite so tough anymore. And that's true. It seems easier now. So people paying attention to that. It's also interesting, if you go back and look at like prior to 2019, LSU, which has been a pretty good team, has lost, multiple SEC games in a lot of years recently. Now, Orgeron overall has been pretty good against SEC competition and really pretty good against ranked opponents. But LSU record-wise, suffered for a while. Last season was a big departure on all of that. You kind of wonder how much of this is, staying power for LSU compared to being the kind of one-trick pony that we maybe saw Auburn be in 2010 when, Cam Newton won the Heisman as a kind of a program savior, but found it very difficult to maintain that level of success beyond that. Lloyd Dog mentions something that makes me think. Did y'all see that Chase Bryce, who at one point in time was rumored to be, and I say rumored very loosely, like in the darkest corners of the internet, there were some rumors that Chase Bryce might be in the mix for Georgia. He was named the Duke starting quarterback, so we'll get a chance to see the former Clemson Tiger as the starter there for David Cutcliffe at Duke. That should be interesting to see. Jay Shipe says, any chance the record-breaking track star UGA Matthew Bowling will ever suit up? I guess the closest we'll see to that was the funny video that Georgia did last year where they brought him in on the last leg of the relay. That may be the closest we ever see to that. With that. G. Grace Bama Boy says, it's going to be a tough year this year. We'll all have question marks in our teams. May the best team win. Grace is, of course, a Bama fan, and there are, I would say, some question marks in every team. The one thing that Alabama seems to have going for it is some, really high top-end talent, proven guys. When healthy, that's what Dylan Moses is. Najee Harris, the running back spot. Obviously, the couple of receivers and an offensive lineman. But, depth at other places may still be a question for Alabama. And overall, when you're playing SEC teams every single week, even for teams like Alabama that seem to not have very many weaknesses, the weaknesses they do have are just going to be exposed a little bit more. So, yeah. Let me go back over to Facebook for a moment, and then we got to get ready to get off the air after that. Ricky Shane Roland Roro says, how's Kendall Milton looking in practice? There's been some online whispers of a little bit of a hamstring issue for Milton. So I guess that's maybe been a little bit of an issue for him thus far based on what the internet is saying at the moment. I don't know how much that sets him back. May not set him back at all, but there have been some rumors of that. Matt Rukavina says that he doesn't think that JT Daniels has had enough time to learn the offense. Yeah, I mean, obviously, he hasn't been here forever, and he's referencing something that Kirk Herbstreit had said. But this is one of those things where the experience that Daniels has had, having played before, may be the kind of thing where even if you have to kind of shorten your offensive playbook a little bit to satisfy what you feel like Daniels can handle and what he's done before, you may just have to do that. I think we're at a time now where experience really matters. I mean, we may even see that at Alabama at the beginning of the season with someone like Mac Jones holding off Bryce Young, at least at the beginning, because of the fact that he's played before. Mac Jones took some big snaps for Alabama near the end of last season. I think we're at a time now in which, quarterback experience matters maybe more than it did a couple of, years prior. Bob Garrison says depth. Depth's what's going to win it this year, and I think that Bob may be right about that. Having a reservoir of talent is going to really matter for sure. Brett Oglesby says that JT Daniels has a high football IQ. Maybe so. You certainly hope so. Chase Barbie says, what's the top 5 SEC preseason rankings? So for fun, let's put Georgia at 1. Why not? We'll put Alabama at 2. So here's something else I was thinking about. and let me workshop this take. So there's no Big Ten, there's no Pac-12. So Chase's question makes me think about this. This is one of those things I thought about the other night in like the middle of the night, and I'm not quite ready to like bring this for full consumption yet. Think about the times in which the SEC has had a non-SEC champion in the mix for the college football national championship. Now, it's been Alabama both times in 2011 and 2017. But also think about what Alabama was in both those years. They were a non-SEC West winner. Did not win the division in 2017, even though they won the national championship. In 2011, LSU won the SEC. Alabama did not, but Alabama won the national championship. So this is a year in which it just stands to reason that you could get 2 SEC teams in the college football playoff. So think about how you could possibly get to that second team. The 2 times it's happened before, it's been a team from the SEC West that didn't win the division. I think it's going to be very hard to unseat Alabama as the SEC West winner this year just because they're just, I just think really talented. It's hard to imagine enough teams beating them to keep them from winning the division. It's one of the other SEC West teams in play for a college football playoff spot because in a normal year, you're not mentioning Auburn in that regard. With everything that LSU's lost, I don't think you're mentioning them there either. And I would bring Texas A&M back into the discussion. So, what are the chances? Because, Georgia and Alabama have the chance of playing twice, right? Georgia wins the East, Alabama wins the West. They're already playing in the regular season. I guess you could say that if, Georgia beats Florida, there's a chance that Florida stays involved in the race of the college football playoff. It'll make those games after the beginning of November maybe more interesting there. But as one of these SEC West teams, the team I keep wanting to gravitate towards is maybe Texas A&M. Are they more alive for a playoff spot because there's going to be a playoff spot open? I've put Texas in the playoff. I think Clemson goes to the playoff. I don't see a second Big 12 or ACC team being worthy. To me, the playoff right now seems like it's Big 12 winner, which I do believe will be Texas, ACC winner, which I do believe will be Clemson, and then likely 2 SEC teams. Like, how do you get to that second SEC team in the college football playoff? Here's the one thing I feel pretty comfortable saying. The second SEC playoff team, on the basis of the very small track record we have of recent history, the second SEC playoff team is not likely to be the SEC championship game loser. Fair or not. Does that make sense? So I'm kind of workshopping this a little bit in my mind. But if there is a second SEC team that makes the playoff, I think there's a very good chance that it will be. I think it'll be one of the teams from the ranks of didn't win the division because the last 2 times this has occurred, that's the way that it's played out. So that is a very long answer to a short question. But when you think about top 5 SEC teams, you start thinking about who would have the path towards being the second SEC team in the playoff if it were to indeed go down that way. Epic Robinson, by the way, flat predicting Mathis to win the starting job. He says JT Daniels is not ready. So there you go on that. Matt Talley with kind of a funny line. This is a good question from Ronald Leach Shepard, who says, "Do you feel like our defense will hold us in the race no matter what happens with the quarterback question?" I think that Georgia's defense gives it a chance to win every single game. I absolutely do. I'm also of the belief that you cannot win a national championship with a defensive-led team. I think you do have to have a top-flight defense to win a championship. You'll point to LSU a year ago and say they didn't. The reason why they were able to do that is because they had greatest offense maybe we've ever seen. I think the odds of anyone producing those results offensively are going to be very difficult to do. So if you have the best offense that's ever existed, quarterback who contributes 60 touchdowns, then you can be only okay defensively. Other than that, you probably do have to have a top-flight defense. But being a team more led by defense than offense, I don't think that's a recipe for winning a national championship. I think that it gives Georgia a chance to win every game, but ultimately the games that matter most, the Alabamas, the Auburns, the Floridas, a matchup with someone in the SEC championship, maybe Alabama again. I think those games will be determined by what offense Georgia finds. Because don't forget this, second half, fourth quarter of the last two games against Alabama, defensive adjustments by the Crimson Tide made offense very difficult for Georgia to find in those games. You'll say in 2018, Georgia maybe scored enough to win that game against the Crimson Tide in the SEC championship, but there was very little offense in the second half, very little offense in the fourth quarter. Ultimately, it's what Georgia didn't do offensively that contributed to the outcome of those games the way that they were. So, yeah, defense for Georgia gives it a chance to win everything, but it still comes back to how much can Monken upgrade this offense? Can Georgia find a quarterback that enables that to happen? Can you get more playmakers involved? Even with a great defense, that's still the pivotal question. Randy Hall says, "Are you watching football this weekend? Which game you most interested in?" Yeah, I'm interested in everything. NFL on Thursday, relatively deep slate of college football on Saturday. I'm kind of into it now. For a while, nothing felt normal to me. This is starting to feel a little more normal, even though we're still a ways away from Georgia getting the start. All right, we got to get ready to go here. Let's get ready to wrap things up here today. Thanks for being here. It's our R.S. Andrews cool down. Make sure you check them out online, rsandrews.com, for all your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. We certainly appreciate that. Also, make sure you check out the AJC, Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. It's a great way to stay up to date on everything happening around your world. Important to follow in and follow on everything that's going on. I mentioned some positive cases at the University of Georgia right now away from the football program. You can check that out there. A good way to stay up to date on all of that. Also, some really cool stuff being done by some of the businesses in Atlanta, including Porsche partnering with an Atlanta startup to host some local food giveaways. That's a great thing to be able to see. Falcons football coming up this Sunday. Braves continue to roll on. Stay up to date on all your Atlanta news now at ajc.com. You'll have a great, great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. We're getting closer to the start of the season. Can't wait to do it with you. It's DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Y'all have a great day, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.